Hi, I'm Peter Haddock, and I'm here with MachineMax for another podcast with Hannah, the head of user experience here. Hannah, user experience. For starters, tell us what it's all about, because we're talking about technology here and we're talking about how it impacts the construction and mining industries in particular. What is user experience, this myth?
Oh, that's a good question. So user experience encompasses all aspects of an individual's interaction with the company, its services and its products. Most people today, when they think about user experience, they think about users in a digital forum, in a digital space. And therefore they tend to separate user experience from customer experience. But actually, if you think about the way that people these days are behaving, especially their purchasing decisions, for example, so pre-purchase, consumption, post-purchase, a lot of their responses, whether that be cognitive or behavioural, etc., they're the same in the digital space or in a non-digital space. And you can definitely see the way that they're starting to change their behaviour or their purchasing decision behaviour, because they ultimately go through different channels, through various different touch points. And it's a combination of digital and non-digital spaces. So for example, if you were going to go and purchase, shaving cream, for example, from Tesco's. So you might go online and you might do some investigation. So you might go say, okay, well, what ingredients does the shaving foam have? Or what are my peers saying about this? And then you start to gather the necessary information and data to be able to make that informed purchase decision. But then you might go into the shop and you might consider it, and you might do a few trials, and then actually you might sign up to a subscription online to regularly get that sent to your home. So the way that you are making purchasing decisions, or decisions generally these days, you're doing it in a digital space and a non-digital space, and therefore user experience and customer experience is the same thing, but people think of them as very, very different things.
Yeah, and the thing is with that, again, you might go to the shop, you might see the shaving foam, and then there's an offer on the one that looks very similar next door, so your eyes go to that, and that changes what you're doing. But we talk about this user experience and customer experience in the construction and mining worlds, and you're absolutely right in that space now that we've got this digital ability to have information and data, but we're physically on a job site doing the work.
Yeah,
whether
absolutely.
that's mining the materials, whether that's digging the trenches for the house building project. And so the challenge with all of that has always been, how do we interact with something easily and to give us information when actually we should be, if you're an operator focused, like looking out the windscreen of your digger, if you're a project manager, you need to be looking behind you, in front of you, and everything around what's going on with the project. And we need information that's right at that specific time for the task we're doing. Like the shaving foam purchase, I'm going there to do that. And so this user experience that you talk about in the digital sense for the construction and mining industry, how is that sort of developing, and how is that taking this sort of knowledge from what we do as consumers into the workspace?
Well, it's all about facilitating a need ultimately, right? And it's designing experiences to help solve a problem, whether it be a digital product or a physical product. All of those, every design decision that you're making is about facilitating a need. So within construction and mining specifically, it's no different actually to any other product that you're making for any other industry. Ultimately, you're there to make their lives easier, their purchasing decisions easier, but even their working lives easier. So all of the decisions that they make need to be made easier because we're developing products and services that make their job easier for them.
And I think what's really exciting about this journey is we've now had a lot of people using connected devices. So we've all got smartphones. We're seeing smartphones, we're seeing tablets, we're seeing all sorts of information being fed into the cloud and fed out to us. But I think the challenge has been, particularly in the construction sector, because a mine is a fixed space, is how do we have that information delivered to us that we would want to use a system or would want to use a process or would want to have actionable information that is useful, rather than burdening people with lots and lots and lots and lots of information about everything all at once? Because I'm the user and I'm just like, what do I want specific information if I'm the project manager on the project? What's slowing us down? What are some of the risk factors? Whereas if I'm an operator or somebody working on the ground, I want different types of information that are saying me what to do.
Yeah, of course you do. So obviously you have to. So we first have to understand who our users are, right? Who are the users actually using our products? But you have your primary users and you have your secondary users. Right. So for us at MachineMax, because of the value that we present to our target market and our target audience, is that we focus on high risk decision makers on job sites. So those are the individuals that who are responsible and extremely accountable to ensure that the projects are going to be delivered on time and within budget. Now, for them to be able to manage that such that they do deliver on time within budget, they are constantly having to make risk adjusted decisions throughout the project development. So that's an area of focus for us. So already you're starting to distinguish what type of information is going to be useful to them versus not. It's all well and good saying, okay, we're going to give you the weather, but actually why giving them the weather? Why is that important? How is giving them weather updates going to ensure that they can therefore understand unforeseen circumstances that might potentially prevent them from delivering their project on time or within budget? So it's understanding what their needs are, but within the context of the value that we offer. So the value is we help you make more informed decisions on job sites, specifically around high risk decisions. So we then need to understand what our customers or our target audience's needs are. What are the highest risk decisions to make sure that they have to understand and they have to make on a daily basis. We understand that, therefore we take their need, we identify what the problems are they need to solve, and then we surface those insights to make sure that we provide strategic direction for the right solutions, ultimately designing a solution that makes them make more informed decisions around the high-risk decisions that they need to make.
So So taking that into context, one of those biggest areas that we're talking about there is, first of all, safety.
Yes.
So everybody going home safe after a day's shift or a night shift on a particular project and site, and how that happens and the things that could prevent that from happening, and therefore looking at how we can manage that safety risk first before we manage all the productivity and efficiency elements that we need to do. So tell me a little bit about how that plays out for somebody like you, the user experience head of the team here, and what things that you gather and then put back into usable information to the people on the ground.
So if we're talking about health and safety specifically within an area, we have to understand what the existing behaviour is for the people on site. Yeah. And we do that by understanding their attitude, so it's by speaking to people, but actually observing them and understand their behaviours. And the reason it's important to be able to do both, to overlay attitudinal data and also behavioural data, is because often what people say they do and then what they actually do is very different. So you'll have workers that go, no, I never apply for additional shifts, knowing they're legally not allowed to, but the reality is that they do. So it's those nuggets of information that we have to go and we have to research and observe. So to give you an example, at the moment we have our customers who are crying out for us to be able to surface people data, because at the moment we obviously surface machine data, but that's only half the story. The other half of the story is to understand people, specifically when it comes to health and safety, but how machines and people are interacting with each other. So to be able to understand how we can improve health and safety, we have to first understand the current health and safety challenges, which, like I said, is all down to obviously people behaviour and how they are currently interacting with machines. And it's not until we go and observe them that we understand, okay, we know that fatigue is a problem. It is a big problem. The reason it's a problem is because they haven't got a channel at the moment to be able to flag to their line manager or the people who are on site responsible for the health and safety to say, actually, I am fatigued. And as a result, those drivers are continuing to do their job and to operate those machines, knowing full well they're fatigued and they shouldn't be, which then obviously causes a higher risk for fatalities, accidents and injuries, etc. Another challenge is that we know the machine operators are actually choosing to do additional shifts, even though that they're not legally allowed, so they're going over the legal limit, which is, again, a huge health and safety problem. Is actually one of the reasons why there are a high volume of fatalities, injuries and accidents on site. So once we understand that information, that's the nugget of insight. So we know that that's the behaviour change we need to change. The change we need to make is to ensure that people aren't wanting to or aren't actually applying to do additional shifts, and therefore they can't do additional shifts, which then reduces the problem.
Yep.
So what solution can we come up with to flag to the people on the job site that need to take accountability for health and safety to say, actually, just to let you know, worker A, B and C is doing additional shifts and they shouldn't be. So it's that type of data and information that we need to flag to them to make sure that they're making more informed decisions alongside the high risk decisions they need to make.
The other thing about that is, you are using technology and data. So, when you've got the MachineMax connectivity into machines, and you've got your device that you can fit onto the side of machines to connect them. But you've also talked there about finding out all the information. So I'm assuming what you're really talking about is using a lot of the data that already exists and pre-exists within the industry, but looking at how to pull that together. For example, we've got advances in technology for safety, which can show people that are coming into incursion zones.
Yep.
We've got fatigue monitors, which actually monitor the blinking of people and things like that. Whereas we've seen MachineMax as being a business that's about the machinery. Mm-hmm. You're now saying actually what you're doing is being much more strategic and looking at all these data inputs, wherever they come from, and how they can be managed in a simpler, more efficient way to actually solve the problem, rather than just say somebody's fatigued, what are we going to do about it?
Oh yeah, every bit of data that we surface, it cannot just be data. It has to be actionable, it has to be insightful, and ultimately you have to act as a consultancy almost, where you're helping them make those informed decisions. So if we can say, yes, okay, here's all your machine data, here's your people data, here's all of your environmental data, whether that be material or whether that be the landscape around you, the weather, for example. It's about understanding what information is going to be useful from those categories and those elements, bringing it all together, surfacing it in such a way where it's not just data, but it's information. But it's not just information, it's insightful. Yeah. So therefore, the insight is there to be able to help them make an informed decision. And that's when I say it's not just data. It's all well and good to say, this is your idling time. Yeah. Why is that relevant?
Exactly.
Why is that relevant to me as an individual? So what problem is that going to help me solve? But equally, help me solve that. I want your support to say, you're going to go over your idling threshold. Therefore, you're going to struggle to hit your sustainability targets, which actually could cause the organisation a huge penalty, a massive fine, which then could prevent the project from delivering on time within budget. So MachineMax, help me make that decision. What do I need to do? What decisions should I make? What is the right solution? And then it makes their job much easier. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, when you look at things like this, there's certainly individual things that can happen with a scenario like that. One, you might have, an operator that's come in that doesn't actually know how to use the machine that well. So that's operator training. Yep. Two, you might have machine health. So a machine is actually struggling to perform to its optimized capability because there's something wrong with the engine, or there's something wrong with the hydraulics. Exactly. Then you might have a scenario, you've talked about the weather there, where the weather actually is, it's tipping it down. And so the haul roads are getting mashed up, and, the trucks are finding it difficult to actually meet their cycle times. So we might want to add on another truck, for example, or we might want to take away trucks, depending on the level of idle time or the level of productivity we're doing. But all of this information is then delivered through what you're trying to do, in a sense that people can make decisions there and then. Yes. So if you look back a week later and say, why did we have all this great big idling time on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever the day is? Well, because it was tipping down with rain, or we had a prime mover that went down. No, it's actionable now.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Here's a threshold you talked about. What is that threshold? And that's about you working with the customer to understand that threshold, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine if you were a project manager and you, at the very beginning of the project, you worked with your commercial specialists, etc., and you allocated a specific budget to be able to deliver a project within a particular time frame. Yeah. But yes, you had a contingency, say 20-25%, but actually the weather has been so appalling. We've had the worst rainfall that history has ever shown in Britain. And that stopped your project, and that's delayed your project by an extra 2 months. That's unforeseen circumstances. Yeah. So if we can somehow identify what those unforeseen circumstances are, draw that information in and then say, actually, based on your existing project plan, we propose that you do X, Y, and Z, and these are the changes that you need to make in your project plan such that you can still deliver on time within budget.
Yep.
That's where we need to get to as a platform and as a business, and that's ultimately what we're striving to do for our customers.
And so that for me is really exciting, because what we're doing there is, you're saying, look, you can't change the weather, you can't change certain conditions and things like that, but what you can do is you can quickly recalibrate using all the information that you've got and collected, because you've got the right interface to interrogate that.
Absolutely.
And because in that circumstance, I'd probably come and talk to your team and say, look, come on guys, in the consultative space we're talking about, what would you recommend? Because you're seeing that happen in all the different markets, and you're seeing that happen, across projects where people are using the data and with the business working with lots of different organisations. And then what's interesting about that then I see is we have this different level of user. So we talked about the people on the ground, health and safety.
Yes.
Then we're talking about the people in the office, the project managers that are running it. Then we're actually talking about, in Earthworks context, we're talking about their customer. That might be a specialist earthworks contractors, because it might be the plant hire business that's delivering all of this information up to that. And they've got their customer that's the tier one, and they've got their client that might be HS2. So all of this stuff, this is the challenge that we've got in this industry, all filters down to say, well, actually, it's the one machine on the site, but actually when we get right to the top, are we going to be able to deliver that core infrastructure project in the 10-year period?
Yes.
So how are you going about, developing these things? What's the type of stuff you've been doing out in the field to gather this information in?
So as I think I alluded to it earlier, there has to be a combination of attitudinal data, behavioural data. So attitudinal data in terms of methodologies is all about us talking to our customers.
Yep.
So we're actually saying to them, what are your emotional reactions or your feelings towards some of these problems that you're trying to solve, or what's your belief, your ideologies? Just trying to really get to understand them and what their problems are and their needs. Like I said, because what they say is not often what they do, then we also have to observe them. So we have to actually go out in the field and observe them trying to complete a certain task. And then we overlay that data. But then we also have to get quantitative data and qualitative data as well. So, we look at behavioural in terms of analytics as well. So not just by doing field studies, by literally going out in the field, but also analytics data. Some of it's observed, some of it's not observed, some of it is within context, some of it's not within context, etc. But then it's about taking all of that data and overlaying it, and that's the hard bit. You've got to collate it, but then you have to synthesize it down.
Right.
So that's the researcher's job to collect all that information. Then it's the strategist's job, the UX strategist, to literally look at this wall of information and data in front of them and try and work out what are the golden nuggets that can provide strategic direction. And you do that by seeing patterns in the data, but even, often you see anomalies, and that can be insightful enough to be able to inform a strategic direction. So it's trying to understand the data in such a way that you then have to marry what is all this data, i.e. the user needs, alongside the value proposition and the business needs ultimately. So it's the three kind of pillars how I envision it. That's how we do it.
And this is why, in my mind, we need to take a much higher level strategic view of all of this, and we need to take it from a step back from the people that are actually delivering the day to day. Because what you've talked about there is a swarm of information.
Yes.
And then you're going to the core of what are the deliverables, what are the low-hanging fruit, the quick wins that we can start building out from. So one, the safety piece. Everybody goes home safe every day.
Yeah.
Well, that means that nobody gets hit. That means that nobody has an accident. That means those are the core objectives. And then seeing how the accidents have formed or whatever, or the incidents have formed. But similarly, when you're talking about productivity and efficiency, look at what a good project looks like, look at what a good experience was, and compare that to others, and look at the environmental and all these different bits that go together. Once you've done that once, you then start getting an understanding of the things that literally make up the jigsaw puzzle and how it all comes together. That's really exciting for me, because why this data analysis and data usage hasn't been adopted as fast as it could have been is because you've got to understand the practical on-site delivery and what the data's telling you.
Yeah, you've got to marry them together to create ultimately it's storytelling, right? And when I say storytelling, I mean it in the simplest sense of using the data and the information to understand what is happening on site, what is the existing behaviour, what is the behavioural change we need to make, i.e. the problem statement, the problem that we're trying to solve, surfacing that insight, and then that will help solve a solution. And then that's how you get from A to B that you're talking about.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is once you've gone from A to B, you've then got the proof points that getting from A to B worked. But again, the experience was that we had, say there's 30 people in the room, we had 20 of them on board. You know, we were able to show them how it worked and changed. Then we had 10 people that didn't actually come to the table, or those people changed halfway through a project or something like that. And that created another scenario. So we've then got the learning from that delivery. So what we've seen in the UK was sort of a big project with the A14 delivered before time and under budget. You know, a perfect example of collaboration and integration and stuff like that in the industry. Yeah. And what's happened with that with National Highways is a lot of that information has been shared. And the other challenges with sharing information are the fact that we still want to have people competing, you know, for work and all the rest of it, but delivering it in a great way and working together. So when you've got all of this together, and when we're seeing all of this, I believe there is a lack of understanding at the very highest level with how some of this comes together, because we aren't an industry that has yet said we need a room full of data analysts like yourselves, and we need a room full of people that are digital construction managers, that are digitally enabled and all the rest of it from the top down. What you're saying to me is we're on that journey. And that journey's coming through a team here that is on the ground and you know, looking at data from years and years gone by and having that interface with the customer to say, why did this happen and how do we make it work? Yeah. So come on then, we've done all of this analysis, you're doing loads of different stuff, you're talking this strategy, high level, on the ground, all the rest of it. What is that materialising into as we look at where MachineMax is now and what you're actually going to be delivering in the future?
You mean in terms of our solutions? What's
going to
happen?
Yeah,
what's going to happen? Oh, that's a good question. And that's actually something we're defining at the moment. So the work that we've done recently is we've done a huge piece of strategic research to basically understand what are the primary high-risk decisions that need to be made on job sites so that we can ensure that we're designing solutions for our target audience that are extremely valuable and useful to them. So for example, we have health and safety specialists, sustainability specialists, commercial specialists, plant specialists, site management specialists and project management specialists. And we've identified them to be our core users because they are the high risk decision makers on job sites. So after having collated all the information from them in terms of what are the problems that those particular individuals need our help in trying to solve, we have a multitude of, say, 50 to 100 problem statements. And we're going through a prioritization order at the moment where we're considering viability, so commercial viability metrics, feasibility metrics, desirability metrics, so that we make sure that we are essentially picking the top 10 of the most useful problems that we can help facilitate and solve for our customers. So we're going through that process at the moment. And then the output of that is simply about us. You know, we've got a design sprint going on at the moment where the team are taking a particular problem statement and they are literally conceptualizing, ideating a huge amount of, you know, I'm expecting to see 12, 15, if not 20, hopefully, different concepts, different types of solutions, because there are many different answers to a problem. So they need to explore that. Then we go in, we pick out what that solution is, we put it in front of the customers and we say, does this actually facilitate a need? Does this solve the problem for you? Does it surface the right data that you're expecting? What are your expectations around us helping you solve this problem? And then we refine it and it hopefully goes into development and it does incredibly well.
And that's the whole point, because People that are in construction aren't necessarily used to the word sprint and the way it is.
No.
It's quite a techie term, but fundamentally it means you're saying, right, here and now.
It's intensive.
Let's just go. Everything's on the table. Throw all the ideas in. Then grab them and run with them.
Yeah.
You're not going to necessarily have all the answers, but what you've done is you've intensified the brains of all the experts here into a period of time that then goes, right, now let's take away all of the information we've got from that and start working up those elements that you said.
Yeah.
So when we talk about construction, we talked about all these different tiers as well, but you also work in mining, and mining is, yes, it uses equipment, but it's a different process altogether as well, and it's a fixed mine asset that you've got to work with. So how do you reflect some of the things that are happening in mining, because it is ahead of the curve? So we've got autonomous vehicles, we've got mines that are using all of these sort of things like safety cameras. They're using all of this data that they're collecting. And actually, some of the machines are being surveyors every day that are going past stockpiles, surveying that data and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But obviously, from a mine, it's that 24-hour productivity, and it's making sure that that's working efficiently because they're so energy and equipment intensive. What's the difference you're doing? Because we've got big mines, we've got medium-sized mines and such, we've got small, specific mines. I'm guessing you're not wanting to necessarily have a solution for the big ones and the middle ones and everything else.
No. That's not feasible or even viable. Or desirable. It comes back to the principles of what we need to focus on and the type of data. So we can literally summarize it by saying there are two core assets that we need to consider. You have environmental data, but then you also have the assets of the organization, whether that be construction assets or you have mining assets. And like I mentioned earlier, there are parallels also between the industries as well. And so yes, there are going to be specific nuances or problems or needs that we have to facilitate in construction versus mining, and we have to consider that, but it doesn't actually affect where they are in terms of their maturity curve as an organisation, whether they're using cameras on their machinery or not, and it doesn't actually affect the behavioural changes that we often have to make in people. A worker in mining often, typically, is they're going to behave and act in a similar way that they are in construction, because we've identified that actually the behaviour is very, very similar. So as a result, often you therefore find that there are parallels in those behaviour changes. So therefore, a lot of the solutions or the problems we're trying to solve, they work for both mining and construction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about these big strategic things, this consultancy approach, we haven't seen this, in my mind, a business taking the understanding of the data that you've already acquired and the understanding that you've got of that sort of fleet process and the management and what the equipment are doing, moving into the people and then moving into the delivery and all of those 6 different core areas that you've mentioned.
Yep.
This really does come from the ground up. And I think the ground up scenario for me is really saying we're delivering all this information to the top where those decisions can be made. What do you personally think that when you get some of these user experience elements right, when we get the right information and the right smartphone or tablet or whatever to the people at the right time, they make their right decisions. How big an impact do you think it really could be on the industry to be able to get real time working on time?
Oh, it's huge. I think it's absolutely huge, because if you can improve health and safety because you're surfacing the right data, then you're saving lives. You're saving lives because they're not being injured, they're not out of work, they don't have to worry about bringing in a certain level of, not bringing in the level of income they need to support their support their family. But also, you're reducing, if not eliminating, fatalities as well. But also for the actual construction business, the amount of construction businesses that go under because they can't deliver their projects on time within budget is huge. So if we can help ensure that their projects do get delivered on time within budget because of the data and the information and the insights that we're surfacing, then that's massive for the industry. I don't think it's a case of is this useful and is the impact huge or not? It's more of a case of whether or not the industry yet is ready for this type of information. I think we have an industry whereby they think that they know everything, but what we're trying to say to them is that no one knows everything, and there are unforeseen circumstances that happen and will occur and will therefore naturally affect what you're trying to deliver. So if we can help facilitate that, then it's going to be better. Then obviously it's going to be effective for everyone.
And I think what's really interesting is what you're capturing now is the intelligence of people in the industry right now, with people that are coming up to say retirement. They've had a lot of practical experience in the industry, and as you're going through this process, talking to those individuals, that's going to benefit the new crop of people that are going to come through and take over from them. But that new crop is actually going to be more digitally savvy.
I was going to say exactly that. They are more digital savvy, and they're more open. It's not even the fact that they're open to it; they're wanting it because they've grown up in a digital world. They've grown up with the rise of the internet, etc. AI is completely normal to them, and it's an expectation. It's a clear expectation. They know that it can actually make things more efficient, productivity can improve, etc. So they need it. They want it. They're not scared of it. Whereas the older generations in construction are a lot more fearful of it because simply that they just don't understand it in the same way. It's not as natural to them because they haven't grown up with it.
But what is natural is sharing useful information, hints, tips, mentoring and all the rest of it. And what we're saying there is we're taking all of that knowledge and all of the practicality elements from site, from the data that you've got anyway, and actually becoming the immediate mentor on site that says something is going wrong over here. What would we do? Then physical people are going to make those decisions and they're going to deliver those things. But knowing that that's the case and not having that information a week later or at the end of the day when something could have happened, having that useful information and targeted is where the difference comes, because then on a very, very busy site, and everybody's always busy in construction, you have limited time. So you're time starved, where you've got, and your tasks are coming out your ears. So if you can get those tasks focused when something has happened or when something should be happening and it's not quite there, then that really does help everybody come together as a team, doesn't it? Because that information being fed to the right people. So, when we've got the user experience, we've got the sustainability manager that we've talked about there on site. They need the data, they need to understand what the impact is in the environment. We've also got over there the project manager that needs to talk to the sustainability manager, but that sustainability manager might even be on another site. But actually, they can interact with the data that they've got, and because that data is one version of the truth, they can all access that information remotely and actually have those calls and saying, look, what's going on and how we're acting on this. And it is about, for me, how we use this sort of cloud-based opportunity that we've got where all the data sucked into the cloud and fed back out. What do you think that's going to look like as you work through this space? How are we able to extract the little bits and the little spaces over to that person, over to this person, whilst also getting the wider picture being seen as well? How's it going to work?
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope that you obviously are able to collate, in fact, not that I hope so, I know we can, and we will. We will collate all the information necessary. We've obviously got our sensors, which is our sensor portfolio that collects various bits of data. Typically at the moment it's machine data, but there are visions for it to build more sensors for us to be able to collect all different types of data. But then we use APIs to be able to draw in that data also. So with that, we can essentially gather any bit of data that we need that we feel is going to be useful to help solve a problem for our target audience. And there's no reason why we shouldn't, and we do it already, right? You've got permission-based accounts on our system such that we can bring in all the information. You have some users that can access all the information depending on their permission levels, but then you have other users which can only access 5% of that information or 15% of that information. But whatever information they access, it's the information they need, rather, and it's the information that's useful to them. So it's a kind of irrelevant on the percentage of what they can access with the data we bring in, but as long as they know that what the data they can access and will be able to access is the bit that they actually need to make those informed decisions.
And I think, right, what I'm seeing now then is as we move forward, what we're saying is that you've got the things that you've already been doing, but you're saying you're now going to be looking wider and bigger in the industry and sucking in data from other machines, from other systems, from other solutions that enable you to collate all of this information in one space. Yeah. Now, that really is that kind of data aggregation type process that requires the big word called collaboration. But how are you saying that to the industry, to other providers of certain technologies and specialisms, what are you saying to them about coming to talk to you, and why do you need that to happen?
Well, I think that there are people out there that are doing an amazing job already. So for us to try and mimic and copy them would be slightly foolish to invest that time, money and resource into trying to recreate what already exists. So partnerships are crucial as part of our strategy to make sure that we are successful as an organisation. But also recently I had a conversation with Plinks and I was saying to them, look, at the end of the day, we can offer you value and we can help inform your product development also, because we're the ones out there researching and understanding the problems that our target audience and their target audience also need them to solve. So it's a partnership in that we get to utilise their equipment to make sure that we can ultimately capture the data and surface that in our UI for them. But then also we feed back information and insights such that they can then help inform their own product development. So it's not just about our product development, it's also about theirs. So the partnership works in many different ways. But just going back to a previous point you made, we're not just capturing on-site data. So when I talk about materials, machine, environmental data, etc., what we're realising is we also need to utilise a multitude of APIs such that we can capture data that is external from the job site. So I'll give you an example. We've been looking at the sustainability manager, for example. The laws and the regulations are changing all the time. And it has a huge impact, especially on large construction projects that are going on for maybe 2 to 3 years. Those regulations and laws, which they had planned for at the start of a project, can often change the start of a project, and that can have a huge knock-on effect on whether or not that project gets delivered on time and within budget, because then they might have to change the design of the building, for example, because new sustainability laws say that each building has to have X, Y, and Z material used within it, rather than the previous one they defined for. So to be able to capture those laws and regulations that are changing, rather than the sustainability manager having to proactively having to go out and find it and understand it, we can use our APIs and say, actually, we know a law is going to change in 3 months' time. Just to give you a heads up, you're going to need to start planning for it now, rather than them having to be aware of it. So we're making their job much easier, because we're feeding them the relevant information that is outside of job sites.
And also that information relates to things like the delivery of hydrogen as a fuel and electricity as a fuel and other those sources of carbon sort of capture that are out there that you can offset with. But all of that information is coming in, and what's really exciting for me is that, being on the ground and having seen some of the work you've been doing with the big sort of tier 1 plant hires in particular, is that knowledge is now embedded into the processes that you're talking about. So it's not just a tech company coming in, waving a flag saying, hey, we've got the best AI, we've got the best this, we've got the best people, we're going to solve construction's problem, because that's ultimately going to fail.
I was going to say no tech company would survive with that.
But from the roots of looking out and in then to the industry, and bringing that partnership together with other technology players so that they are providing the information in the right way, that all helps us to move forward and say, look, to everybody, whether it's the top of the tree like national highways, here's what's doable. Then we can look at how that sort of process and that information is mandated, so that therefore the industry works together, like machine control has happened with the likes of Leica Geosystems on site. We all come together then and go, right, we're all working to the same goal. But fundamentally, it's about getting that user experience right,
It is.
Hannah, with your team. And that's the reason why, you know, the words user experience are so important, because if you can't use it, you won't have a great experience. If you don't use it, you therefore won't be a user. And fundamentally, if we don't get everybody on board and work with them to make sure things are for them, working for them, helping them do their job, not hindering them, not adding more pressures, then we'll never get this big journey that we're talking about and continuous road to net zero as well on the platforms that we really need to do that for. And so, Hannah, it's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Good luck with all the sprints, all the user experience
Thank you very much.
information, and I hope to speak to you again in the future. Cheers.
Thank you so much.